time I invoked the goddess, I mean really invoked her, was, well, in India, masturbating. Which is highly ironic because I've never been much of a masturbator. I think I was in junior high the first time I stuck my fingers in there, and that was to insert a tampon. So I was really quick about it, and I lacked the necessary curiosity to explore the whole situation. And then I had girlfriends tell me what I was missing. They bragged about cucumbers and hairbrush handles, even toothbrushes. And this was before they vibrated. I had one woman offer to show me how she does it with a Coke bottle. I was like, whoa, okay, I'm happy just massaging my pussy lips from the outside. I admit I got into the occasional handheld shower head and vibrating back massager, but I never had the overwhelming urge to penetrate. And I thought that was normal. Until I got into my sexual healing journey. And I started to inquire why that was, what was it in my history, and I thought maybe it was because my mother was a slut, and not an ethical one either. She cheated on my father for 20 years. And even after she got caught, she had so much shame and guilt that she projected it onto her daughter, and especially her daughter's sexuality. And so she told me she didn't want me to get pregnant. She didn't want me to be like her mother, who had 18 pregnancies. In Mexico, she had one baby after another. A baby-making machine she was. When she passed away, at her funeral, there were 52 grandkids, my cousins. So my mother took me, before I was even sexually active, to the gynecologist. And they told me that they wanted to check and see if my hymen was still intact. So I put foot in cold metal stirrups, and the Christian doctor began to preach at me about the evils of premarital sex. Then he put a barely lubricated metal speculum inside me. He cranked it open and then left the room. He went to tend to other patients while I waited. I think he was trying to teach me a lesson. And it wasn't until a couple years later that he was sued for malpractice that I realized that that wasn't normal. And my healing journey continued. Actually, it was my spiritual journey that took me to India. Later, I was, like most spiritual seekers, taking the obligatory trip to find myself. But I told myself, this was special. I was a Tantra teacher, and I wanted to find the source of sacred sexuality, my lineage, my roots. I ended up in a sex cult. Fortunately, my husband followed after me, and he suspected the guru the whole time. He was like, it's not like the guy's a total quack. Some of his teachings are cool. It's just he contradicts himself sometimes. He says, worship the goddess. And then he says the most misogynistic bullshit I've ever heard. My guru didn't care for Michael either. He was like, I don't know why you brought him. One man cannot learn Tantra from another man. He wore these orange Swami robes, and he had this big bushy beard, bald head, and the most piercing eyes. And he says, this is why I learned from the goddess Kali. I channeled her, she teaches me, I teach you. If you want to teach him, that is your business. So he proceeded to ignore Michael and give me the most amazing teachings about how to adore my breasts, move energy through my central axis. In fact, did sound healing, where he would put his lips on my root chakra, and my spinal column was this flute. He would chant mantras through me. It's profound. Later in my ashram, I wondered about the hygiene, with that big bushy beard. And I could curry and get curry in it. I did have one really powerful teaching that he gave to Michael. Every night after satsang or pujas, we would go back to our room, and he told me to stand and invoke the goddess. And Michael's job was to revere me, to prostrate to me, not only to his knees, but belly on earth, one cheek on one foot, the other cheek on the other foot, and to really call forth the divine. I have to admit, in the beginning I was like, dude, you're embarrassing me, man. Could you get up? But we did it every night, and eventually got more and more comfortable. The guru's contradictions reached a climax when his senior disciple, who's also the mother of his child, came to him and contradicted his teachings. And in broad daylight, he lost his temper and slapped her across the face. Michael's like, that's it, we're going. So I didn't argue. I packed up our bags. And then I had a heavy heart about telling my guru that we'd decided to move on. It felt like we were breaking up. As I told him, he gave me these mala beads, and he spoke to me about my spiritual potential, and he pleaded for me to stay. But his words were deaf on my ears, because I was at that point in my journey when he was stepping down from his pedestal. And then I told him that we were going to Kerala to see Amachi, and he acted like I was cheating on him. He lost his temper, and we ended up leaving by night. We drove clear across the state till we finally found a hotel, a cheap little hotel where we could crash for the evening. And Michael has a knack for falling right asleep. Meanwhile, I couldn't meditate. I couldn't sleep. I was so heartbroken about leaving my teacher. And so, to entertain myself, I found a pamphlet. It said, welcome to Kerala. We have a 70% literacy rate. You can drink the water. Yeah, right. We are a communist state. No public display of affection. It will not be tolerated. So I just laid there, staring up at the cinder-blocked windows, and when the moon rose and came into view, it cast this eerie glow on my skin and around the room. I peeled back the sheets, and it was like a goddess had slipped in with blue skin, and she wanted to dance. So, first I started some slow, melancholy movement, and then she wanted to see herself. So I went over to the dingy hotel mirror. I was astonished. The luminescence glowing back at me. I got aroused. And that's when she spoke. She said, "Take me." And I looked over at my sleeping husband, but I knew no mortal man could satisfy this desire. So I pressed my body up against the corners, the right angles of the room, and I began to explore the undulation in my hips. It was like my pelvis was a bowl, and the sexual energy was sloshing over from side to side. And sometimes It was beckoning me in. I actually plunged into my wet depths and felt spaces there that weren't there before. They opened up. And that energy spilled over. I went through waves of surges of energy for hours through the night until my body was spent. I didn't want to sleep. I wanted this energy to continue because I didn't want to lose that goddess feeling. And then she reassured me, I am eternal, she said. And I melted into the mattress and went into a deep, dreamless sleep. Oh, I felt hungover in the morning. Michael was getting dressed. Aren't you excited? We're going to see Amma. I felt like the goddess was gone. I was back in my personality. Excited. Seeing Amma, she couldn't compare to letting the goddess borrow my body for the night. But I found the energy to go, and something special did happen. Watched as this hugging saint embraced thousands of people. This small brown woman took whole families into her arms. And when it was my turn, and I felt her embrace, it was like the same energy that animates her moved through me, and it was recognition, validation. And I was renewed with my purpose of sexual healing. Because when I felt her energy, and I knew that she had been born and raised in Kerala, a state where public display of affection is not allowed, and she's made it her life work to hold people, I got that is sexual healing. So I came back to the States with renewed purpose. I wanted to sustain this goddess energy and to heal and move with people. In fact, sometimes it would come in me, and then sometimes it would leave. It was kind of like the moon waxing and waning, but not that regular. It was a little bit more like a cat who came and went as she pleased. But when she came to me, it was usually when somebody had had some kind of a wounding. You know, I would hear their stories, and my hands would heat up, and I would just want to move and breathe and heal people. And I wanted to learn how to sustain this. So I started to read everything I could, and that led me to Kenneth Ray Stubbs' book, Women of the Light. This new Sacred Institute book told stories of modern-day Dakas, Dakinis, healers, and I was so touched that I wanted to meet him, and I went to Sedona to Baba Dez's conference, and that's where I met Baba Dez, who became my co-author. Together we wrote the Sacred Sexual Healing book about the shaman method of sex magic. And it wasn't about the people I met or the teachings we wrote. The profound change for me was getting that I'm part of a revolution. That there's a whole band of us that are doing this work in bedrooms, in hotel rooms, and even in the occasional temple. Whether we call ourselves sacred sluts or sacred prostitutes, priestesses, heaven's harlots, or holy whores, some of us don't even use labels. Some of us don't even charge for our work. Some of us may or may not sleep with our clients, but we all serve the goddess. And the goddess moves through each one of us differently.